on behalf of UCAN as part of our open Fora program, the fourth week that we are trying to discuss university lifelong learning from different focuses, and we are trying to respond to some challenging issues. This week is related to bridging active citizenship and university lifelong learning. And today it is an honor for me to greet here Mpine MAKOE from University of South Africa in Pretoria, and Dorothée SCHULTE from FernUniversität in Hagen to discuss a very interesting topic regarding changing era of higher education in general. And we are very much honored that you will share with us and with all participants your ideas. And before we start, let me just ask participants of today's session to change a name tag at your picture. You have on the top right corner 3 dots. You can change your name. May I ask you to rename, in the sense to indicate your first name, your city, and your country where you're coming from. It would be interesting to see this on your paths. All right, so thank you very much for coming in. And I think if we have a good look on the world today, I think the topic COVID-19 is something that is shaking up our everyday connections and customs and all other things that we got used to. And I think it's a very much challenging issue in manifold aspects. So I think there's no wonder that we are trying to resonate how it may change higher education institutions in different perspectives. What I would like to just to raise as an important issue is that since yesterday, Alan Tuckett was making an input with his masterclass keynote speech regarding roles and responsibilities of higher education. I think today's topic is going to provide a continuation of such focus. And I think it is very much interesting these days that there are so many turbulent issues which you can find in the context of higher education, whether it is the matter of participation or the challenging issue of performance, or the other way around. When we are not focusing on educational aspects, it is also a strong matter of research work, how universities are trying to work in a changing environment. And for today, I think it would be very much interesting to look into some very, very interesting areas of higher education and relationships to social, economic, environmental, when we're just trying to reach out to matters of accessibility and inclusivity. Let me greet our 2 presenters, and let me give the floor to Mpine and Dorothée. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Balas. And this has been such a wonderful pleasure for us to come and present on this very important topic today, and where we have to start with accessibility and inclusivity in higher education and its impact of COVID-19. We will discuss this further and talk about the issue of the future in relation to these 2 topics, in relation to these 2 concepts of accessibility and inclusivity. Next. Well, these are our beautiful selves, if you so that you don't forget who we are. I'm Mpine, and I'll be representing the past, and Dorothée will be representing the future, as you can see in terms of ages, as we sit side by side. But basically, what we are going to be talking about, I'll start. Talk about the history of the Futures Network and where we are and where we are coming from. And then Dorothée will talk to us about where we are going in terms of the research that we've conducted with the experts in the field. Next, okay. Maybe let me just give you a context. The University of the Future Network, it's a network of academics from around the world. We have people from South America, from Africa, from Europe, from America, from Canada. So all these people, they came together and decided to look at the future of the universities, what the university should look like. I know, as you had mentioned, Palas, that these days we talk about the future, and thanks to COVID, because COVID all of a sudden jacked us out of our comfort zone and made us realize that we need to do things differently. And for us, we've been in this business since 2016, when we started this network. And we are researchers, academics, others are in management positions. So it's a variety of people who are involved in these futures networks. And anyone who would like to join us, please feel free to do that. Our purpose, however, was to develop policies and strategies for the transformation of higher education institutions. So our focus has always been planning for the future that you may not know. But even if we don't know the future, we always plan for it. Education is about the future. It's about planning for what we want to be or what we want to do in future. So I think because we have been used to doing things the way we've been doing things, it's very difficult for us to think about the future. But I think COVID has forced us to do that. Next. Our topic is dealing with COVID for a specific reason. It deals with the issues of looking at the future as defined by the COVID-19 pandemic, and as COVID-19 pandemic as a trigger for what we want to be. And as I said earlier, that we started looking at the future of the university prior to COVID-19. And it's a very interesting finding when we compare what we found before and what we are finding now during the COVID-19. And COVID-19 pandemic triggered a lot of things. Almost overnight, we were expected to do things differently. Many countries had to go on lockdown to ensure that we don't spread, to cap the spread of the disease. And all of a sudden, we had to work from home. Students had to learn from home. All these things we were not prepared for. And as a result, most academic or most universities were beginning to teach their students online, but they were using the same methods that they've always used in teaching in a classroom. So all of a sudden, there was a need to learn how to take face-to-face teaching to online environment, because that's a very different environment from what we are used to. And the teaching online also brought to the fore that we need certain systems and structures to support the digitalization. And what was brought out in the spotlight was the issue of inclusivity and accessibility. And I was quite surprised when I was communicating with colleagues from Europe who were also telling me that they have issues of inclusivity and accessibility, because in our context, we know that that is a problem. And in our context, we know that many students don't have devices. We don't have ICT infrastructure that can support all these things that are needed. Electricity is not stable. So we were expecting that in our place we would be much more in a disadvantage. But we also found that it is not only in our space, it's all over the world whereby the skills are needed for people to teach online. And not only that, there is also a development of curriculum to teach online. And again, you need certain devices. And the surprising thing is that many people have cell phones, have access to technologies. They can go in front of their computers and all that. But it is not about teaching. They can do it for social purposes. They can do it for business purposes, but they cannot do it for teaching and learning purposes. So this was one of the areas that was that came to the fore as we were discussing the issues of the University of the Future in relation to COVID, and how do we prepare to ensure that all people are included, and all people of different age groups are included. And our concern, however, as universities were moving at the space of digitalization, we were concerned about the focus mainly on short-term solutions. Universities and schools were there just to make sure that teaching occurs during this time of lockdown. However, not much thought was taken into consideration when they are looking at also what happens after this, when we get into the discovery period, because there will be a period where we have to be able to discover ourselves and find out how to move forward, and more importantly, how we get to the resilient, from recovering from COVID-19 to the resilience of the university. How do they become stable after all this? So this is where our study comes in. Our study comes in not only looking at short-term solutions, it also looks at medium-term solutions where we will be recovering from all these things that have disrupted our ways of doing things, and then take what we have learned from the recovery period to develop long-term plans so that we do not find ourselves wanting should this kind of thing happen in future. Next, Dorothée. So, so this is one of the reasons why higher education has to respond to COVID-19 and also respond to its challenges of COVID-19. One, we need the skills, because all of a sudden, everybody had to be forced to move to online learning. And these skills are not only for teachers or for academics or for lecturers, they are also needed for the management of universities, because they have not managed anything that has been in an online space. And even now, we are working from home, and it's such a struggle for universities or even different industries to deal with people who are working from home. We need also to address issues of learners who are systematically excluded by not having the necessary devices, by not having access to connectivity, by not having other things. So we need to come up with creative ways of ensuring that all students, irrespective of their circumstances, are covered, and all students are included in the education sector. And I think COVID also, what it brought to the fore is the exclusion of people in the participation of higher education. And the other issue is that we need to overcome short-term emergency solutions, because short-term emergency solutions are just that. They are just for an emergency purposes. So once we get out of that, then there is a big new world out there. So it's important for us to start putting processes and plans and systems and structures in place to ensure that this is the education we aspire for, and this is how we are going to achieve it. Next. So COVID-19 actually challenged us to rethink our missions. I always say that education is a service. That's a starting point. Education is a service. And as a service, it must be enabling other people to be involved in it. It must be an enabler. And over the years, education has been exclusionary. It has been removing other people who do not have maybe the funds to get in, or the other opportunities. And this is where lifelong learning comes in, where we are enabling people who have been excluded for a variety of reasons to come back into the teaching space. So our missions in universities, as I had mentioned earlier, that because we need to reskill people, our missions need to include those things that we need to do in order for us to ensure that we are all inclusive to all different types of people. It's not only your students, an 18-year-old who has to come through, but different students have to come in. We need to redefine our roles in relation to our public responsibility. The speaker yesterday talked a lot about the public responsibility, and this came in very well, that what is our role as universities in relation to public responsibility, in relation to active citizenship, because that's our business, to ensure that people are actively involved in the society in order to contribute to the economy, to contribute in our context, to contribute in the development of our countries, to contribute to creativity. Because now things have been in such a way that all of a sudden we don't know how to do things differently. So our education system need not to teach us to do things the same way, all of us, as if we are the same thing. It needs also to look at how its role impacts on the public responsibility. And most importantly, education must ensure accessible and inclusive learning opportunities. This is a social mandate of the university. This is a social justice mandate of the university, because as a university, we are expected to ensure that people have equitable access to teaching and learning, or to learning, and also equitable access to opportunities that will allow them to be able to be active citizens. Next. Now, why do we need to address accessibility and inclusivity in the context of the lifelong learning? First of all, I did say that education is a service. We are in a service industry. We need to serve. And because we need to serve, education is a fundamental human right according to UNESCO. So all of us have a right to education. It provides skills that needs to respond to global challenges of the 21st century. Beyond COVID-19, there are so many challenges that we need to address. And there is the 4IR that has come through, and education system needs to be amenable, and it needs to be changed, that we need to change it, malleable and changeable, so that we can be able to ensure that all the people have the necessary skills to perform in the 21st century. And I had mentioned equitable access, and again, it should include all forms of learning, formal, informal, semi-formal. Any type of learning that takes place should be recognized in a formal setting. And this is where lifelong learning is most important. People come into an environment into a learning environment with skills, with knowledge, with certain things, and probably all they need is a certificate or something just to make sure that they have a certificate. So I think we need to promote lifelong learning in all our aspects of teaching and learning, and universities need to play a leading role. We cannot afford to be the university that looks down upon people. The university of the future must be different from the university that we have now. And COVID-19 has accelerated the need for education beyond formal qualification. And that that all of us have to go through, all of us, not even the students, the 18-year-old, but all of us need to go through reskilling of different types and of different ways of learning differently, because COVID-19 has just woken us up to the realization that learning has to occur, things have to continue to occur without us meeting and without us being together in one space. I think then the next one, I think that's the final one. Next, I'm going to, now it's Dorothee's time. As we talk about the past, I told you that Dorothée will take over for the future.
Thank you so much, Mpine. I take over for now. I hope you can hear me quite good. Yes, what we did in I think spring this year, we were requested by the UNESCO Futures of Education initiative to contribute to this initiative with perspectives on education. And the initiative, maybe short words to it. It is, I've included the link so that you can later on check out if you don't know this one. It aims at reimagining on how knowledge and learning can shape the future of humanity and the planet. That's and in 2021, I guess, the Commission wants to publish a report on forward-looking visions. The initiative started before COVID-19, and it's very much focused on SDG 4, so very much related to the sustainability goals, and we talked about it yesterday too. But they look at a new target perspective of 2050. They want to go beyond the 2030 agenda. And as we were requested to contribute, we as ULLL decided to contribute with revisions on teaching and learning in higher education, as higher education is our focus we deal with, or our future of universities in general. And as we were requested in times of crisis, we decided to especially look on the impact of COVID-19. And doing so, we decided to have 3 focus groups with experts of ULLN in May and June 2020. And these results from our focus group were also published as report to the initiative to inform it. And we focused on 2 of the core areas which were outlined by the International Commission on the Futures of Education, which is knowledge, production, access, and governance, as well as citizenship and participation. And just to complete it, besides these 2 core areas we were looking at, there are 2 more which are named as human and planetary sustainability and work and economic security, just to let you know about it. And let's come to the results of what we're talking about. So first, we were asking for visionary paths they see for the future of the future of teaching and learning in higher education and related challenges and opportunities. And the experts stated that higher education in the future will likely to be blended and online. And even though delivery modes may change, universities or university buildings are still seen as important where people meet and socialize. And they also predict that higher education in the future will be more personalized by offering flexible learning opportunities, which means that students will become more demanding on where, what, and how to study. And they also highlighted the aspect of flexible movement of students as well as lecturers, and that supporting professional collaboration are key to opening up higher education. And this was linked to that higher education institutions will need to pool together knowledge between higher education, company, society to attend to more people and new opportunities in the future. And of course, there are maybe the key opportunities they see are related to One thing which is quite obvious, I guess, that the pandemic has forced education in general and higher education sector to use technology to enhance teaching and learning. And digital learning had to be implemented quickly and thus accelerated digital change quite fast. And in this, there can be the opportunity to create an aspired future or to rethink the purpose of higher education under the new circumstances and to transform education system as a whole or to education systems as a whole. But there are also challenges which were mentioned, which are, or I think it was the main concerns were related to the capability of students to move online, as well as teachers' online teaching skills, which is very much related to issues of lacking technical equipment, internet access, as Mpine already said, or connectivity, and both students or lecturers were not necessarily skilled for online learning or teaching. And maybe from an overall perspective, the infrastructural barriers are also a question of ICT that might be good in developed countries, but not that good in developing countries. So we have that kind of inequalities in that term, and that there might be, that was quite interesting, resistance to change, which was very much linked to leadership. Then they said that strong leadership is seen as key to drive innovation and address structural changes that are needed. And if leadership does not want to change, it's very difficult to drive changes. And another aspect which addresses the students' expectations and engagement was that some students are happy with going online, but others may not want to change, and that this needs attention when rethinking the learning process. And we then ask for how to realize accessible and inclusive teaching and learning in higher education, and what has to take into account. And the experts suggest that teaching and learning in higher education should, I think that's was very much highlighted as the most important point, and Mpine already addressed that, is the digital divide and to bridge the digital divide. That means that these many types of inequalities that occur, which can be general access and general access to devices, general access and devices, sorry, and also the ownership of equipment, which means different types of experiences of learning, if you have a smartphone or several computers and several screens and so on. And I think that's a very important point which was mentioned, is that some may not have healthy learning environment at home. So even not able to learn in a good learning environment. And of course, as our geographical aspects that affect connectivity, if you live in a rural area with bad access. And of course, as already mentioned, the inequalities in terms of skills to move online. And another aspect that was mentioned is to include the students' different ways of learning. And as accessibility challenges are often seen as structural problems, but not as related to the students, it was said that it is meant to not relying too much on the possibilities of the students and taking into account differences between them, instead of seeing them as homogeneous group. For teaching and learning, it means taking seriously what it means to work with students' individual pathways and providing flexible personalization of learning. And they also mentioned that support online and autonomous learning, that was quite interesting, is seen as key to achieve skills for self-directed learning and data literacy, which also means to diversify the ways of support we give to students. And also diversifying higher education itself to ensure that everyone who wants to study gets admitted and can choose between different types of higher education institutions. Not in many situations is not that possible. It depends on countries and systems. And for example, state is starting in a community college and continuing studying at another university. And they said the aspect of providing alternative ways of teaching means as hybridization of system. That was a quite nice citation, which means that it's important to decide for teaching according to the context, students' knowledge, etc., and removing, or finally removing, the one-size-fits-all model. Yeah, which strengthens the idea of adopting blended learning approaches to ensure that education is accessible to students with a diversity of means. It means not only face-to-face or only online, but to mix it up and to find hybrid systems. And maybe to sum up, what are implications for what is our topic for today or for the week in general is for active citizenship and university lifelong learning. As I already said, the bridging the social and digital divide that has accelerated through COVID-19 and with higher education moving online or education moving online is key to ensure participation and active citizenship, to make it possible for people to attend to education and support students' individual learning pathways as an opportunity to foster social justice and civil engagement. And this is linked very much with the individuals and their needs to be self-motivated and self-adaptive in order to be kind of resilient even in the face of disruptive changes and uncertainty, that students learn to adapt, to be adapted under changing situations, under changing circumstances. And to achieve this, it was said that higher education institutions need to integrate the students' voices in the planning, designing, and developing of teaching and learning approaches to support students' individual learning pathways. And this is quite similar to what you, Alan Tucker, told yesterday. You also mentioned the aspect of integrating the voices of the students in higher education. And it calls for a higher education environment that allows for personalized and flexible learning opportunities, and to give students the opportunity to autonomously choose the most suitable approach for learning. And I think I come to an end. Maybe some conclusions which are more general, of course, and to give impression for further discussion. And university lifelong learning can be seen in this context, can be seen as key to serve as an enabling space to provide lifelong learning, to provide lifelong learners the competencies that are needed to perform in a new environments. It can be therefore seen as task for higher education institutions to create learning opportunities that meet possible future requirements. And what COVID-19 has brought to the fore is in a way a lack of agility and flexibility in higher education. And this, we need to be cautious not to remain in an emergency mode for long. I think for now it's the opportunity we have, but to establish visions for higher education that questions on how current changes will affect the future, how they can be addressed, and how to adapt these changes in a beneficial way in order to ensure lifelong learning opportunities for all. And in this sense, viable strategies are needed on how to deal with change for the future we aspire for, connected to policies, to higher education institutions, and within our teaching and learning. And I think with this very important, and that was an overall consensus, that it is important to lay the ground for fundamental changes during crisis. But it can only happen if there is political will to plan for the future of higher education and to invest in education. That means, for example, in the best case, free internet for all, so that this is not a barrier anymore. And maybe just to give an hint for further discussion, it is the question for higher education, for what is needed for a sustainable vision for teaching and learning in higher education. That is what we wanted to do with our discussions, to give inspiration on to think further and to think about what visionary path we could take for an after COVID-19 era, let's say. Okay, thank you so much. I stop the presentation and I hand over to Balázs, I guess, in the first hand.
Well, it's just my role to just simply to coordinate the discussion. There was a question to come from Ellen Duckett. Did you look at the possibilities of mobile learning as a route to overcome accessibility issues?
Thanks for that question. Yes, we did. In fact, most of my research is on mobile learning. That's when I started being interested in the issues of accessibility and inclusivity. Maybe just to give you a very short example, right now during the COVID, we had a lot of students, not students per se, we call them students, but these were teachers who were already in service teachers, and they were thrown into a deep end, and they were asked to teach students, learners, primary and high school students, to teach them using online learning, and many of them didn't know how to do it. So we developed a very short program to assist them. I'm also in open education resources. So we picked an open education resource on digital literacy, as well as teaching students to go online. And then we put it together, but I thought we would just give them those resources and they will be able to make sense of it. We realized very early that they cannot even open those resources. They don't know what those resources we're talking about. So we had to support them. So we used that's when the mobile learning came in. So we used mobile phones, and we used WhatsApp because all of them are familiar with WhatsApp. And we formed groups within WhatsApp to help each other, because then they were becoming more and more. There were many. We didn't expect such huge numbers of people who signed up for this particular program. And then we divided up into groups of 8, so that they assist each other, and they assist each other in terms of how they can work in an online space, how they can, like in the digital literacy, they wouldn't know which button to press, what needs to be done, moving this person to that thing and whatever. So when they were working together on using the mobile phone to support each other, they can say, now open your phone, open your computer, look at the icon on the left. They didn't even know what the icon is. Now look at something that looks like people. Then they could press the people. So, and they would go step by step, helping each other. So as tutors, because we were tutors as well, we would look at these groups, how they are performing, and maybe jump in if we see that they are dealing with something problematic. So mobile phones helped us a great deal in terms of facilitating the learning that this group of people who knew nothing about teaching in this space. So though that is one thing that we use, and we emphasize that we should use something that students have access to, that is already available, that they know how to use it. We don't have to go back and use something that they don't know how to use, and then teaching something that is new as well. So it just provided that space for socialization, for lack of a better word. Thank you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Dorothée, do you have a comment on this particular question?
No, thank you. This was Mpine.
Yeah,
You did
okay.
well. Thank you.
I would like to make one question, is that, and I also put it into the chat. What would you identify as major constraints of getting higher education institutions, universities, to practice their public responsibilities through redefined roles in order to realize their new mandate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should I go first, Dorothée?
Yes, of course.
All right. I think one of the major constraints is that it's the issue of history. Universities have been operating like this for many, many years. And it has been a closed system for many, many years. It has been a system that is elite, that is meant for people those that can come in. And it was not an open system, for lack of a better word. It was not an open system, it was a closed type of a system. Now, when you say to them, rethinking about opening it up, it creates a whole lot of, it's an issue that is not something that we think about in our spaces. I work for an open distance learning university, and trying to even in that space, trying to open up in terms of ensuring that people who come in are not a one size fits all. People who are coming in, they come in at different levels. And we need to provide support for those different levels, which I think in this time, with technology, we have an opportunity to do that much, much better, because instead of the time when we used to develop stuff, study material and everything else, study material is easily available in an online space. There's so much information in an online space that you can take it and package it in such a way that students can go through it. And all you do is to facilitate that learning. And I think if we can just say, you facilitate the learning so that people take responsibilities of their learning. And the minute we allow people to take responsibilities of their learning, they will be able to do far more, much more than we are doing right now. We are actually creating more work for ourselves as academics, rather than just use the system that is already there and ensure that we can do it much, much better and easier.
Thank you.
I hope it responded to your question.
I just want to add a very interesting point from the data, which was not highlighted very much in our presentation. And it was like the tension between the new normal and the versus the old normal or the normal. And it was said that there is a tension between the turning towards new normal and reverting to traditional ways of doing things. So a sort of backlash could happen if the experience with online learning, moving online, is that bad for lecturers and students, for both lecturers and students, that the wish of going back to normal predominates the need of opening up for the new. And that was quite interesting point, because I think it's also to facilitate that, to make sure or to be aware of how to say that it can be a good experience to be motivated to bring it further, to go in that direction and not to revert back. That is quite interesting, because some of the experts told us in their experiences with students and their learning that there are a lot of resistance of students not to move online, not to move to remote learning, and how to deal with and how to make it happen that there can be a social, how to say, social experience within online learning environments. That was also said as very crucial to it. That was maybe quite interesting aspect because you ask for constraints, and I think that can be a problem if it's not facilitated quite good. Yes.
Before we go on, let me just remind participants that you can put questions or comments to the discussion, and I give the floor to Herbert Hinson. Please.
Yes, thank you so much. And I was happy to see that you had in your presentation some comments on the futures of education, which is currently running by UNESCO. And of course, everybody knows that this is a follow-up on the Delors report, which was so important for us. And actually, I'm working in the field of adult education, and I'm old enough that we sent from the International Council for Adult Education a comment for the Delors Commission in '94, and we just worked on a comment and a statement from the International Council for the Futures of Education. And to build the bridge and the link, we have a chapter in there which is looking at adult education as an academic discipline. So I think it's very much in line with the work you are trying to do. And let me add on that tomorrow when I'm talking a bit more about what could be friends and partners with whom the University Lifelong Learning could work with. And I will take the stand arguing from civil society organizations working in adult education and trying to show some opportunities for this sort of cooperation. So actually, I'm looking very much forward to the final report of the Futures of Education, and let's hope that they can really give a bright future to the orientation of the universities as well as to adult learning and education.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is something that needs comments from your side, but I just try to follow Heribert and just to underline that I think it is a time for collaborative focuses and integrated focuses in a time of crisis, and not to return back to elitist and reductionist views on how to use educational policies for both social and economic advancements. Thank you. But I give back the floor to you.
No, thank you so much for that comment, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I also like the idea that you're talking about adult education as an academic discipline. And I think we need to promote that, so that it's not, in many universities, it's just something that belongs to a small unit at the corner. And because it belongs to a small unit at the corner there, it is not considered as integrated within the university structure. And I think what this pandemic has taught us is that there is a lot more people that want certain skills and competencies and knowledge about doing things differently. There's going to be high rates of unemployment that are already there in many countries, and people need to change the way they have been doing things. And there's a knowledge, during the knowledge economy, things are changing. So there's also need for new employment opportunities. So people will be changing their degrees or their qualifications, but they don't want to go through those 4 years or 5 years of university degree. They just want something that they can do in 3 months or in a year or something, and get a certificate that certifies them to change their careers. And now the changing of careers is even much more critical. And I think it's not only what the universities will be doing, it's what the public will be forcing the university to do. I think it's not necessarily the push. I don't see it from our side. I see the push from the demand from outside getting into our space. And the universities that are going to be successful are those that are going to be able to identify that and address it as a need for those particular people. And those that are standing, they are going to lose more and more students, because even though the young ones are not going just to get in there to be in a system for a very long time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dorothée?
I don't have to add anything, Mpine. You just put it so good together.
I think there are so many colleagues with us from different universities, from UCAM community. I was just wondering whether they see these challenging issues of inclusivity and accessibility as matters striking each and all institutions, whether you may come up with a question or a comment regarding a concrete situational or structural example that you might want to highlight. I think this is something very much interesting from from very many aspects, like, for example, policies, and then provision and financing. And so there are lots of aspects of these things occurring. But what Heribert raised, I think it is also there in this new recent UNESCO document embracing the culture of lifelong learning. I think it is very much there that we need to change institutional approaches to learning and teaching. And in this regard, lifelong learning can better be pursued if they are not just collaborative matter, but more inclusive and more holistic ways of recognizing the diverse arenas and diverse practices, methodologies around learning. And I think that is it's not just challenging, but it also can be a good lesson for communities and organizations like higher education to respond effectively to future challenges, because I don't think that in the future we are going to enjoy life without these kind of pandemic situations. I think there will be many more potential as constraints to grow. There is another question from Anita Berlin. What is your advice to higher education institutions how to better see or identify the demands from outside?
I think some of the things that we raised in our presentation, I think one of the ways, and this is something that the experts had raised, is one of the ways of looking at this is to begin to plan and strategize for the future we require. And we know that we live in a highly regulated environment, at least higher education system in the highly regulated environment. And we had to go back to those regulations and go back to the planning around those regulations. But I think also as academics, we need to come up strongly against those kind of things and say, you know, and produce the research that says these things that had been done, it's a regulation for the 1940s for a particular context. It's not working in this present context. And as I said earlier, that it will be the people, the public itself, who are going to be demanding things differently. In South Africa, for an example, we had students who just went, we had a student uprising in 2015, 2016, and all the students were complaining about where one of the things was the decolonization of the curriculum. And we had to hear it from students. And that's a group of people who came back and say, we cannot continue to do the things the way they have been done. We are tired of learning the same things that even our mothers and everybody else have learned before, and that is not even addressing our situation. So people are going to start demanding things to be done differently. Right now, it may not look like it while we are in this particular situation, but when it comes to recovery, and we are recovering from the pandemic, and people want to leave, then that's when we'll start people seeing differences in how people will be putting pressure on the system that we are so much comfortable in. And that will even go further in terms of, and that will define what is going to be resilient after, which institutions are going to be resilient after the COVID-19. You are unmute. Sorry. Thank you.
I think what was also interesting is that it was said that it does not necessarily mean for higher education institutions to lose track of what they stand for. You know, primarily university, which is on presence, or face-to-face, which is focused on face-to-face, that can be good in the future too. It's like thinking about what we want to stand for, what is our mission, and whom do we want to address or can we address, and what are the demands of the people we want to address. And that was quite interesting, and that is the mindset thing, I guess, we try to bring further, is like future oriented visions and strategies on what is the aspired future we want to address, even as institution, where we want, which path we want to follow as institution. And it's not just to be, it's more, it's different to being reactive on what happens around us. It's not the only thing. It's also to have a path on where we want to go, for what we want to stand for. I think that gives people or students the chance to get an idea of what I can expect from the institution I decide for, because as we said, the expert said that there will be more flexibility on students moving from one university and offer they get and so on. So we as universities maybe have to be quite clear on what we want to deliver and how.
Thank you so much. We soon come to an end of today's program. Before we do, may I just give the opportunity, if any of you want to put a direct question or comment, by turning on the microphone from the audience. Helge, please.
Yeah, I would like to make a comment which is going a bit beyond the university at the moment, and that is I try to observe a bit critically, well, of course, in the limited situation of Germany or Europe. I think globally it's maybe quite different, but I'm not so sure. But if I look at what is coming into the university as students in the coming years, it is those who are now in the primary school, in the secondary school, or even in the kindergarten. And I think those parts of the educational system, these subsystems of early childhood or of schooling, I think they suffer much more currently of the COVID crisis. Because the universities, after a few weeks, they could re-establish themselves quite quickly with all kinds of digital modes in their presentations, or even in their seminars and in their workshops, and how they could communicate. And of course, there's still a problem how to deal with all the exams and all that. But if you look into the way how the education is taking place or not taking place in what we call the kindergarten or the kita or in primary school, and then I see, at least in the German case, a much more heated debate on closing them again and again than I see currently at the university level. Yeah, so there is, with all this debate of the second wave or the permanent wave of the COVID crisis, I think that is quite a severe issue. And if I look at my own area of being a lobbyist for adult learning and education, then there we have the same dramatic situation, because it could not as quickly turn around and have everything in a digital mode in adult learning and education. They were just closed down. Yeah, and in many areas, adult learning and education institutions like the community learning centers or the literacy classes, they are still locked up. So I think with all our difficulties in higher education, it's still a bit better off than many other parts if we look at lifelong learning institutionally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herbert. Ben Davis made a good comment, quite natural and right. The focus has been on tools for delivery of the curriculum in time of crisis. But I hope, she says, I hope that the crisis is also opening up dialogue about the curriculum itself, as we heard, the nature of knowledge as well as the tools. And maybe opening up a space for us to communicate more effectively with policymakers. Frankly, they need our help, and that's very much true. Alfredo just indicated and thanks for this. At Anita HI, let me tell the example I know of University of Georgia, USA. They have a branch in almost every county of the state of here society, here in quotation marks. So I think these examples are very much important, how some higher education institutions may listen to the sound of current echoes and winds, because I think this is something very much important to recognize social claims and demands. And I think those stakeholders around university in urban areas and beyond. So, but I also put a comment to Herbert's comments that I think it is even more difficult with public education in many parts of the world. It's representing even a higher divide, digital and beyond. So in the time of COVID-19, there are so many young people who have no access to digital tools or have no access to Wi-Fi whatsoever. So I think this is reality. And Christina Paulus from Vienna is coming in. Christina, you can turn on the mic and put your question, please.
Okay, I just want to mention, and maybe this could be also a good idea of this community. In Austria, we have the sister organization called eucen, from UCAN, and we are 3 experts now developing a concept and a plan how we can offer validation concepts and validation processes for the public for 6, 7, and 8 as a community. So actually we're making a serious concept about our seeing and searching what our main topics and main activities are concerning the SDGs, concerning reskilling and upskilling for green technology and for green skills. And in this, Raphael, sorry, my son. So in this area, we try to work together with our IMS, which is working together with us in terms of unemployment. And therefore, we really try to offer a broad possibilities for people to get more jobs through upskilling through universities, lifelong learning.
Yeah, very, very exciting and very much, this is something of representing quality orientations and service focus. Thank you very much, Christina, for your comment and practical example to be shared. Thank you very much for the presenters. Thank you very much for the participants coming in to this second presentation for the week, discussing how to bridge active citizenship to university lifelong learning. And by the end, may I just ask UCAN colleagues in Barcelona to share the slide of the week, if I may ask this. And you can see here the week program. Tomorrow we will have Herbert Hinsen to discuss active and global citizenship in the context of international environment and practical examples. For Thursday, we are having colleagues from Belgrade University, Katarina Popovic and Maja Maksimovic, to discuss students and community engagement in civic education as an interesting case where universities may have an input. And then on Friday, we are having the panel discussion of each and all week participants and presenters. So Dorothée and Mpine, let me just invite you for the Friday event. We will see each other, I hope, on Friday at 12 o'clock Central European time. And may I thank for the participants to have shared their time and interest to be with us for this Open Fora event. And I thank for the colleagues in Barcelona to provide the technical backing for this platform discussion. Thank you very much indeed. And I wish you every good, stay in good health, and thank you for your inputs, comments, and questions.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.